Welcome back to another episode of Two Chaps Many Cultures. Happy anniversary, world. We've been in a pandemic for a year. Isn't that reason to celebrate? I don't know yet. We'll figure it out. But apparently, some cultures deal with the pandemic differently than others. We talked about this a year ago when the pandemic started. So now let's take inventory, shall we? Stick around.
Hello.
Hello. How are you doing, good sir?
I'm doing good. Doing good. Yes. I'm very loose.
He's very loose. This guy had a full day of virtual training, hence our later start time today. How tight and loose are you after this, my friend?
I don't know. I'm pretty loose. I've been standing on my feet. I like to stand up. I'm sitting down. I'm sorry about this, but I stood up and it was good. I enjoyed it. I feel it went well and was a repeat of something I've done before. So I kind of knew the topic about Australia, by the way.
So I think he knows that country. He's got a little bit of information about that.
A little bit.
Welcome, everybody. Episode 152, Two Chaps Many Cultures, the program about the business of culture and how culture affects how we do business, or how we try to keep business alive. How do we keep our societies going during a time when it's probably the biggest disruption that we've seen in our lifetimes? COVID-19 still running rampant, wreaking havoc on our societies, disrupting it big time. And I mean, I sound like I'm talking about a stock market blip on the screen. No, it's actually 500,000 people died from COVID just in the US alone. What is it? 2 million and something around the world. This is serious. I'm not trying to exaggerate it. I'm not trying to downplay it, but humanity has been thrown a curveball, as we would say here in the United States. And are we hitting that curveball or are we striking out? That's a baseball metaphor for those of you who are wondering, what's this guy talking about? But if you're not dialing in from the United States, see that scrolling bar on the bottom here? Let us know where in the world you're watching this from. Let us know where you are. Let us know if you're safe. Let us know if you have successfully avoided getting the COVID, or maybe you have caught it and successfully recovered. Let us know how you personally have been dealing with the pandemic. And Brett and I want to talk about how culture has been at full display during the pandemic management.
Absolutely. Well, I use the image of the rope, as an intentional image here to at least kind of give some denote where you have a tight wound structure that we could probably assume has some additional strength to it, rather than a kind of varied dangling strands of their own, relying on their own strength. So, that is kind of one indication, perhaps, of, and we're certainly not saying that one is better than the other. There's certainly societies in this world that operate very well with loose structures and in a loose way, with the rules that are there, but that are pushed against and become flexible. So it certainly does succeed for a certain period of time. But there are people that have done research on this, and it's been shown that even in particular countries where states, say in the US here, where states may be a little bit more susceptible to natural disasters, whether they be man-made or whether they be absolutely natural disasters, then they do have a tendency to have a tighter a tighter structure around rules and what governs the society. So it can happen inside a country, but it also can happen as a wider cultural concept. Yeah, for sure.
There's been many articles and podcasts and, I don't know, TV programs filled around the topic, how culture or national governing principles are affecting how we manage the coronavirus pandemic. Brett and I, we've done actually, I think, a full hour episode a year ago to discuss this very topic. And I wrote a blog post for a publication out of Australia, matter of fact, for the Mental Health Institute from Australia about this very topic at the very beginning of the pandemic. And we kind of predicted that we would see different responses and we would see different approaches to managing this level of crisis. And I think many of our predictions in the cross-cultural arena have come true. And I was reminded of this topic at the anniversary, quote unquote, at the year mark of the corona pandemic, by an article I saw in the Guardian from the UK, who was, I think they interviewed Michelle Gelfand, who is the author of a book, Rule Breakers and Rule Makers or something. I probably misquote the title of her book. And she's the one with her research that defined cultures into these two baskets, the loose cultures and the tight cultures. And tight cultures being those who are a bit more obedient of rules or more following the system that has been put in place. And loose cultures are, well, as the word says, a little more lax and relaxed around how we follow rules or how stringently we follow them. And right now, it appears that those cultures that are tight around rule observance, is that the word, Brett? Do we say rule observance?
Yeah.
Rule
adherence? Rule adherence.
That's it. Thank you. Rule adherence. They seem to fare a bit better. Like look at the death toll, the COVID death toll in tighter cultures like Japan or Korea or Taiwan, where the death toll seems to be much lower percentage-wise in terms of people who caught the virus or total number of population, compared to countries that are deemed as quite loose, such as the US, where, as I said earlier, we have a death toll now above the 500,000 mark, or some Mediterranean cultures that tend to be a little more loose around this. And one has to wonder, is it possible from a, I don't know, from a lawmaking perspective or law enforcement perspective to become tighter or looser as a society, depending on the threat level we're dealt with? Would that even be possible? I don't know. What are your thoughts around that, Brett?
Well, it's difficult, and we'd love to hear from you guys out there what you think. But I think in an observational sense that the idea of freedom, the expression of freedom and the ability to think for yourself and be an individual certainly has its wonderful benefits. I mean, I often talk about this country, and the reason I enjoy living here is there is that freedom, that general freedom to think and act for yourself. But it also comes with a measured observation that what happens if things go really, really wrong, right? What is in place for the support of the people that don't have either the access to services, the support network, the safety net below them. And so, you know, again, using that kind of rope analogy, ropes are usually made from some type of, or nets are usually made of some type of material. And the strength of that material is what the strength of the net depends on. And so if you've got a very, very loose structure and bigger holes in your net that you allow people to fall through, there is a certain amount of kind of fatalism that comes with that, and also blaming, from people that don't have to rely on the safety net, is that you are in this position because it is kind of your fault. We see a little bit of that. So there are what we're doing this here is not to place blame. It's just basically put a structure around the reasons why the response has been what it is. And of course, when you've got a loose set of rules, it may, I'm not an expert on this, but I would say, does it also then influence how people respond to the actual facts of the of what's going on? When we've seen the misinformation and the lack of information, and even quite frankly, it's understandable because there's been the government. It's hard. I mean, I couldn't imagine people in power that have to respond in a very, very fast-moving and unknown, responding to an unknown kind of event like this, where they're just putting information out the best as it comes to them, right? And so then does that in and of itself already in an underlying kind of mistrust of authority and that sort of thing that comes in, that then just kind of amplifies that and says, well, see, you said one thing last week and now you're saying something the next. It obviously means that what we believe and conspire, what your conspiracy thoughts are, is being justified because now you don't even, it seems like you don't even know what you're talking about.
Yes, and I agree to a certain level, because it would make the point, or one might deduct from this, that pluralistic societies are susceptible or are easy victims to manipulation of the masses, so to say, because we have a multitude of voices, we have a looseness in terms of culture that would allow different views to be held and allow different views to be out in public. In the US, we would say First Amendment right? Freedom of speech. And then there is also tight cultures that are, I would argue, pluralistic, right? I would not say that Japan is a culture where there is only one public opinion allowed, right? There are dissenting opinions. They may be voiced in a different way. And I think that is where the tight, loose explanation may not be enough to explain it. And no disrespect to the author of the book and to that research project, I think there are other cultural dimensions at play that we shouldn't ignore in this. There's how we approach status and hierarchy and how much deference we give to authority. There is how much we value the interest of the group versus the interest of the individual. And there's also how much are we willing to go into the unknown, into the unprecedented, not knowing the potential outcomes. And if you're looking at US culture as an example here, as one of the biggest countries with the biggest death toll in this pandemic, we're seeing a culture that is predominantly very individualistic, that has a rather skeptical view of hierarchies or power imbalances, and that can be quite forward or future positive with going into unknown territories, meaning that, hey, they say this virus is dangerous. Well, let's see how dangerous it is to me, because I think I'm fit and I take care of myself and I have a good immune system, and I don't mind. We'll see about it. Let's let others worry about this. I am master of my own destiny, so why worry much? Might be one approach taken by a lot of people, as we've seen here in the United States, which would be a behavior that in more collectivist, group-oriented societies would be a behavior that's not rewarded, that may actually shun you, that will make you a pariah within the group and say, well, what's wrong with you? With a program, we have rules here, tightness, and you stepping out of line is jeopardizing everybody else, which is a behavior that in individualistic, egalitarian cultures may actually be applauded, right? So, oh yeah, you go, you do your thing, you do you, and I'll hunker down in my home and double mask, right? So it's we're not saying that one culture is better than the other, but some of these behavioral models may actually explain the outcomes, right?
Yeah. Actually, just when you were saying that, I think that I was reflecting on listening to something about this last night. And so there's the one side of the people that just kind of either mistrust the information, and I don't want to do that. I'm fit, and I'm this not as bad as it looks. Therefore, I don't want to get the vaccine and all that kind of stuff. That's one. But there is also an altruistic, I heard this on many callers into a radio program last night that said, well, again, I'm healthy, I'm fit, I'm kind of young, but I feel bad because I have been put to the front of the list on getting the vaccine, and I feel I don't want to get it because I think other people should get it first. So there is a true, even in that's kind of a tight culture type of attitude to say, I value the lives of the other people in my community over mine, or maybe assume that they're in greater danger than me. So therefore I really want to have them go to the front of the line. I guess the actual medical experts on the show said, we just understand we are looking for the absolutely fastest way to immunize everybody as fast as possible so we can get to this herd immunity and all move around, right? So the argument might be initially, yes, it seems like a great altruistic type of approach to say, I want to give this to somebody else to go to the front of the line. But that's underestimating the fact that this virus is a different kind of animal, and therefore, even if you're carrying it as a healthy person, you can affect that by that.
Right.
Yeah. So I could see that both sides of the argument, coming to the same conclusion. Yeah.
There's another aspect that just came to my mind as you were talking, and I think there's a few examples. We already talked about Japan, and another culture, another nation culture that comes to my mind is Israel. So as we're looking at these vaccination rates around the world, the one country running away from all the others in terms of speed and rollout of vaccine within its population is Israel. A fairly small country on the Mediterranean coast, and yet their efforts and their systematic approach and their almost, it looks like they're taking no compromises. They're rolling this out with no hesitation whatsoever. May seem that this might be a tight culture where there's a government instructing its people to have this done. And that's not exactly true for Israeli culture. Israeli culture is, okay, not as individualistic as most Anglo-Saxon cultures, but it's a fairly egalitarian approach. There is a bit of a power distance. There's also a level of risk averseness within the Israeli culture and a directness in communication that would not make it fit into the tight basket that we talked about earlier. And the reason I'm bringing this up is maybe it is societies that have a collective memory of a major disaster that leads them to this more tight approach to pandemic fighting. So in Japan, we have a society, the only society in the world that was affected by 2 atomic nuclear bomb explosions, and this is something that is still a collective memory, even though it's been handed down to the present day population. But there is a collective historic memory of a threat that could potentially wipe out all of us. And within Israeli culture, it's the memory of the Holocaust. 6 million lives lost at the gas chambers of Nazi terror. So in this effort to replace the 6 million since 1945, Israel is taking no chances, right? This is a potentially existential threat to our existence. So we're not fooling around. Let's get this done. So maybe the memory of a disaster or of a huge disruption in a society would lead to a more tighter approach in responding to this threat, even though the culture itself may not actually be classified as a tight culture. Perhaps.
That's interesting. So then, do we hypothesize that this experience, in all its devastation, is a turning point, a potential turning point for something like a place like the US collectively? And obviously, those individual states are referred to that are more susceptible to natural disasters have been shown to be tighter in their social structures. But does this mean it generally now applies to the rest of the US? I mean, I think there's enough. The problem is, I'm just a personal observation. I think that there is enough of the doubt and the mistrust that's still left over, unfortunately, from the political machinations that have taken place over the past 4 years, that I'm not sure whether that's possible. But
I'm not sure either.
Is this the defining moment, like it was for the Japanese, like it was for the Jewish people, like it was for other countries where they've faced really, as you say, existential threats? I will get it out. Will this be seen as an existential threat to the US and the loss of 500,000 people? And we haven't finished yet. There's going to be a lot more people that die. But what will it take? What is the level that you're able to say to a society, it's time to kind of wind things up a little bit in terms of the metaphor of the rope and bind together as a society to face these threats, because this won't be the last one. But again, in a society that sees such positivity and optimism, who knows, maybe this in 5 years, people won't even remember this. And that's the danger. They don't even remember it.
Yeah.
They see it as just a blip and an unfortunate event that they had to live through. But it'll never happen again, right? Because we're an individualist society, and we can determine our own fate. That's the danger, I find, anyway.
Yeah. Plus, the US culture is so future positive and not necessarily lingering on events of the past that it still surprises me after all these years living in US cultures. How quickly things are forgotten, and how the memory of things past isn't necessarily informing our decision making today, because the belief in a better tomorrow is so strong, which is great for innovation, which is great for never stopping, never giving up, always trying something new, which a lot of other cultures are lacking in. And it also makes us as the people living in North America, it makes us susceptible to ignoring future threats because we have forgotten the lessons or never learned the lessons from the past, potentially, right? I don't have the numbers, but from anecdotal memory, from reading the statistics over the past couple of months, I'm going to throw another piece of rope into the mix here. I think that coming to Mama moment that you were hoping for, at least it sounded like it, Brett, that may actually only come when the death toll or the infection rate or the new infection incidence rate increases in the majority population. It appears that African Americans are suffering much, much harder, or have a much, much higher death toll in North America than the Caucasian white population. And even though this sounds cynical and racist, I believe this is maybe another building block of the indifference that we have seen in the US. Well, it ain't affecting me because it's not affecting my circles in which I operate. And if those poor people on the other side of the railroad tracks that I have no emotional connection to are affected, yeah, that's terrible, but it doesn't affect me, so I'm good. I'm blatantly exaggerating, right? Don't make this. I don't want to make this sound as if most people think that way. But is it possible that this plays a role as well. The racist, disenfranchised limits to or limited access to health care, that because the Black population is disproportionately affected, the majority population may not deem it necessary enough to act. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so it's structural racism, right? It's structural inequality that exists in the country. And again, although I would be, you know, there's positive light in the end of the tunnel here. We suffered from that in Chicago here very early on in the rollout of the vaccines, which relatively wasn't that long ago, where, but it was identified pretty quickly that only 14 or 15% of the African-American population were getting access to the vaccines. And that was actually seen very early and identified very early. So they took very intentional steps to turn that around. And I think just of last week, we're at about 52% versus, you know, white and African-American differentiation. So it has become more, it can become more equal if you actually do get your hands on it and identify it, right? I might add that maybe Chicago, in terms of its current governorship, mayorship, sorry, Lori Lightfoot, who is an African-American herself, also an openly gay African-American, you know, had hopefully maybe her influence and being forceful and making sure that these are addressed. But again, you know, you see comments of people saying, well, you know, this is typical of liberal type of, you know, give everybody a helping hand that they don't deserve. Those comments still exist, and it's really difficult for me to kind of put my head around it. As a foreigner, as somebody who's just as a humanist, I think, well, that's what a funny thing to say. I mean, it's just not one or two people. It's so embedded in the psyche of some people that are just outside the purview of the city of Chicago, that it is, it's just worrying. So again, you know, maybe we're not painting a very good picture here, but, you know, it needs to be faced and identified.
Right.
But it is motivating, you know, people look at this culture through rose-colored eyes, certainly internally, through rose-colored glasses. And hopefully in some there is a glimmer. I'm not wishing bad things on this place, but I'm just saying, what will it take? What will be the devastation that this place needs to go through to finally at least look at these situations, this structural inequity that exists? I don't know.
Right. And what would it take to tighten up, so to say, to pull the reins a little bit harder in order to curtail and curb this the fallout from this health threat? I don't have the answers. I don't think you do either. Simply a projection. I might be wrong. Maybe you do have the answers, and you.
Oh, I have them all. I'm just not telling you. You know, it's yeah, it's my secret. You do your own. You know, you do your own research. Go and do your own research. I've got Google.
All right. I'll go on Parlay and find out. Telegram.
Oh, it's that time of the day where we can be facetious, and we don't even have a drink yet. Well, maybe you do.
No,
I always forget. Sorry,
I haven't. No. On that note, I'm hoping to finalize my conversations with a dear friend of mine who is African American, who works in the health field and has in higher positions, and he has some access to information on how these disparities might be resolved in the future and how they have played out in the past and affect us today, because there's a lot of African Americans who distrust the health system, and for very obvious and good reasons, and that also may play into the higher death rates among African Americans in the U.S. But we're not limiting this conversation or our exchange to just the situation in the U.S. I think the tide versus lose is worthy of looking into, as are other cultural dimensions, in analyzing how societies go about solving or addressing these issues that are bigger than every single one of us. And if I'm going to make one blatantly personal, subjective prediction, is unless we are tightening up a little bit and addressing the greater common good over that of the individual, we're unlikely to be successful in this. That's my personal opinion, and many individualists might crucify me for that. Go ahead, I'm yours. But that's I think that's what needs to happen, is we all develop a stronger sense of unity and common group interest in order to come to terms with this.
Absolutely. That is our wish, our fervent wish.
I wish. May it come true. Now,
Yes.
you, my dear sir, have deserved a drink. I don't know what it will be, but I know personally you have deserved one.
Oh, thank you very much.
And those of you watching live or the recording, let us know your views. Let us know your thoughts and ideas around it. Make sure you follow us here. You see all the socials that are relevant for you. Also, quick announcement for tomorrow, because tomorrow we'll have an interesting topic, Brett and I. We're going to be talking about intercultural or cross-cultural relationships, romantic relationships even. And after our live program here on these channels that you're watching now, there'll be a Clubhouse conversation without video, just voices. So you can join us there as well. And I just realized the time is totally wrong, so I'm going to put this insert away. All you need to know is Clubhouse tomorrow, and I'll have it fixed by tomorrow. Give us a like, give us a hand clap, share this as you see fit. Interact with us. Tell us what you like. Tell us what you don't like. And don't be a stranger.
Absolutely.
With that, I think it's time for us to say good evening, good night, or good morning, wherever in the world you are. And Two Chaps, Two Cultures will be back again tomorrow.
See you guys. Bye.